They can't stop the day we dissect the news, flipping on the edge, choices to choose. Politics and laughter, a blend that's so real. Tune in for the stories that make you feel. With guests from every angle, let's bridge the divide. Finding the truth in the humor we can't hide.
So would you say that it is critical to assess feedback from that perspective of, well, now we can use this as a learning opportunity to have thicker skin, to move forward, and to, instead of having an emotional response, having a logical and develop some sense of clarity from that feedback to then improve?
Yeah. I mean, let me just say straight out the bat, having an emotional response is completely normal and fine. Emotion is a change motivator, especially negative emotion. So if you're receiving feedback and it hurts, it doesn't feel good, I just want to say that's actually a sign that there's just a mismatch between your working model and, you know, what's been presented to you, right? Here's a mirror and whoa, I was not expecting to see that, right? It hurts and that's good. There is no problem with negative emotion. Negative emotion is there for a reason. It's highly functional. It has evolved to get us to change something. So totally okay to have that moment where you're like, fuck that guy. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. So just have that moment, okay? Get it out of your system. Like, it is not going anywhere. But yes, all honesty and all feedback is there to change, improve, strengthen you or a relationship or something else, right? It always has positive intention. If you're receiving honesty or feedback that's just designed to bring you down, like somebody's just being aggressive, that's not something that you need to use. But anytime honesty is coming from a place of, I want to see you get better, I want to see this relationship get better, I want to see, you know, you perform better in this way, that's a beautiful thing. And, you know, part of that moment that you had, you know, when it's coming from somebody we admire, there's also another message there that I don't think we're always aware of. And that's when somebody that we love or admire, respect or whatnot says something to us that's like that, right? There's a hidden question that comes from you afterwards. And that's, do you still like me? Do you still love me? Are we okay? Right? And we never think about the relationship part of any honesty that we're receiving from somebody. There's always that part of, but do you still like me? And so when you're giving honesty to somebody, I always say to people, like, make sure that you're affirming that relationship. Like, I'm being honest with you because I want you to get better at this. It's for your own good or it's for the good of us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what takes the defensiveness down a little bit.
I received some pretty rough feedback this year too, just from our test scores that just fucking sucked.
Of course.
Fucking sucked. And
you gotta sit with that for a minute.
No. And my initial reaction was, well, goddamn, we lost our school. And then we had to go to, and you know, there's all these, and it's true, we do have a lot of, but no, I've come to the point where I'm looking within now. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Time for you to get back to the basics, Eric, of, okay, every day this is what you're going to do. This is what, because I really had gotten to the point in my own teaching where it just kind of, going to a school I don't want to go to, and through no fault of our own, our building almost collapsed. And, you know, we are going to be going back, but it's just, you feel like a refugee teacher, and it's tough to be engaged every day with kids. And so kids are leaving and parents are taking off and it's not nobody's fault.
Right.
It's just these circumstances that we've been thrown into. But our scores in particular, I was like, oh my, okay. Time to do the old gut check again. You know, either is it time to move on, right? You go through the gut check, or is it time to change things up? Which we'll do, change things up. And of course, my school situation, right now, we can't buy a break. We've had a couple of staff members now dealing with major health crises, major things. And it's just like, my God, can anything else go on this year? And some kid things going on. And it's just like, I almost want to just limp to the end of the year and get back to our homeschool and just let's turn the page here. Let's just start a new chapter. I'm almost to that point. I won't. I'll show up tomorrow with my A game with my kids, but it's true that it's, man. So I went to a training Friday about feedback.
Oh, you did?
This is what I'm recertifying my principal's license.
Nice.
And so I've decided I'll keep it for whatever future time. But one of the concepts they did was feed forward, which is the idea that once you receive feedback, and honest feedback, like this is not. Let me paraphrase my principal. This is not working. But think of yourself and ask the question, what would it look like if it was working? And then follow that particular pebble path into a new pasture, so to speak. So if it was working, what would it look like? And obviously my first response was like, well, we'll be back at Jenkins. We'll be back in my regular school. And I won't have 10,000 illnesses to deal with. And I won't be dealing with a non-functioning bathroom. And I won't, and I'm trying to make excuses, but it's just one of these years. And this year, especially, it's just been extremely difficult as a K-12 teacher. I don't have it. It's been online because you've been doing mostly online. Do you do the in-person classes?
I teach a mix,
okay.
But majority are
have
online.
the kids been resilient? Not resilient? Generally okay, or what would you say? I mean, it's been a mixed bag for us this year in the K-12 system.
I would definitely say this year's been better than previous years.
Okay.
The COVID era was hard.
That was a bitch.
Yeah.
And
it just what you were talking about. When sort of systems and things are falling down around you, I think it's really hard to kind of think like, oh, well, what am I going to do now? Like, what is my role in all this? Even the concept of feed forward, which kind of reminds me also of Appreciative Inquiry, which is something that both Liesl and I teach. But there's this sense like, okay, so what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, let's actually be honest about our reality. What could we do now with what we have?
Yeah.
What are the fires that need to be put out now rather than us dreaming about,
some future. It also doesn't help in our case that one of the other grade levels did perform pretty well on their tests and stuff. Well, and there's also the problem with standardized testing that it can be sometimes, depending on the emotional condition that's going on, kids can give you their best or kids can give you they're not best, depending on whether they're connected, whether they're feeling it that day, whether they're feeling forgotten, kind of a thing, and they're like, well, screw this, I don't even care about this stupid test. And then you get data that isn't reflective maybe of what can actually be done, and so it can be a deception of itself. You're like, does this data actually tell me the truth, or is this a moment in time? What am I, so we're wrestling with that too right now. So
well, I was also interested, I'm jumping back to authentic leadership a little bit, but when you with authentic leaders, I know charisma is something that's, related to that. And I just think with charismatic leaders, I always feel like they should have the label that says use with caution, or, interpret with caution, because I feel like leaders with high charisma or highly charismatic leaders it's almost difficult for high levels of authenticity because their charisma is something that almost innately makes them difficult to always be authentic, because they're your rhetoricians. They're those who have this almost otherworldly power of rhetoric that they can convince us of anything with their beautiful language, and then their kind of supernatural powers of persuasion, and they're just almost gifts of leadership that seem like they come from somewhere else. And I just perceive high charismatics that way. There are cult leaders, and there are ultra mega politicians and things like that. And I just think that it's fascinating to study them because they rise to the top. And then, there's also these fascinating studies of sociopaths and psychopaths that
And
end up,
narcissists also,
end up being organizational leaders or drawn to high positions of leadership, which is another whole area. But what do you think about that link of charisma and authentic leadership in terms of how we can perceive their honesty?
Well, it's complex because, first of all, in some sort of bizarro fashion, charismatic people are seen as more authentic. Like if I was to ask, I was to show videos of people and some are more charismatic than others. And I was to ask people, rate their authenticity. People would be like, this person's really authentic, right? So our judgments of authenticity tend to be based on very performative and aesthetic grounds rather than, on the leader's actual authenticity. Internal trait authenticity has to do a lot with self-awareness, balanced processing, relational transparency. So, those are the things that charismatics don't do because charismatics like to be above and separate from.
Like a hierarchy. They see themselves at the top of the pyramid
Almost
or whatever.
godlike, deity-like.
Okay,
right?
above the pyramid.
Supernatural.
You mentioned
like an ancient alien.
In fact,
One
the
could
word
say.
charisma is like Greek for gift, like
Gift.
Charm.
Yeah.
I think charm.
So there's always
Yeah.
there's an exceptionalism behind charismatic leadership where it's like, I'm exceptional, I'm different to you. And as soon as you're coming into any space with that mentality, authenticity just goes.
Yeah,
because
that seems
authenticity-
dangerous. That to me seems like the bullshit meter in me starts going off like immediately. Like, oh,
Right.
really, Mister?
But that's just
Mr.
it. It
Jesus.
doesn't
Doesn't
necessarily.
necessarily.
You
Yeah.
think it does, but
don't
you're
know.
actually drawn to them. It's the opposite.
Like, so who are you drawn to?
well, like I would
Like, who are
say
you drawn to?
Obama.
Like-
I would say Obama was a high
Interesting.
charismatic, and
Okay.
he just was able to move people. I mean, look at the way he came out of nowhere and took the nomination,
Yeah.
for the Democratic Party without even finishing a full Senate term. I mean,
Sure.
because he was
Sure.
just so highly charismatic.
And for me, like when I watch MLK, if I see MLK give like an "I Have a Dream" speech, there's something about that that's
yeah.
And it has to also do with the preacher, sort of, the pastor.
And I know he wasn't a
Oh, yeah.
perfect man, and there's some skeletons in those closets. But when I watch it, even from the old black and white 1960s videos, I remember when we went to the Lincoln Memorial. I had to go stand on the steps where I just had to go do this stuff. Lincoln is another one too. That,
I remember I peer reviewed an article that said that men fare better in terms of charisma than women do. And it probably harkens back to that idea of the great man theories, and that we see our men as more natural leaders, and we see that as more charismatic, or we tend to. And women have a harder time, I think, building charisma or
not
being
Elizabeth
perceived as
Holmes,
charismatic.
Right? Elizabeth
in
Holmes
some
was able to get Theranos
Elizabeth
billions and
Holmes.
billions of dollars based upon lies.
Well, Elizabeth Holmes is an interesting case study because she tried to be perceived as masculine with dropping the voice down. And
Have you ever heard of this lady? Do you know who that is?
Oh, very well.
Yeah.
That's what I tried to do. I tried to drop my voice.
Yes,
a little bit so I can be
you
perceived
you
as
pull it
masculine.
off. You
Thank
pull it
you.
off.
I try.
Yeah.
You should
Yeah.
get a startup going. I'm sure lots of people will invest.
That's it.
Yeah.
My
They'll be like, "Did you hear that guy's voice? Oh,
Yeah, so
Yes.
masculine.
He's
So
we need
masculine.
some venture capital going there straight
Yes,
away."
I'm gonna toss my money there. I'm just gonna make it rain.
Hey, that's why I got that jet. Like I said,
6 feet tall.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dark voice.
Has
Or
a
has a
jet.
deep voice.
Yeah. Has a which is funny.
Drinking water.
Yes.
I'm properly hydrating.
Hydrated.
He's hydrated.
He's hydrated.
Which is interesting,
Score.
simply because there is talking about perception and deception.
There you go.
It's fascinating to me that there are organizations, businesses in the coastal areas of the country, specifically pertaining to the United States, that will use cutaways from the interior of an airplane to make it appear like you're a social media star because you are taking pictures inside a private jet, so that you are living your jet set lifestyle,
Your best life.
and they'll have backdrops of exotic locations to make it appear as though look where I went on my vacation. And it's interesting to me that again, are we just simply more concerned about creating this false sense and this how would you even describe it? It's not even deceitful at this particular point anymore. It's just this performative, inauthentic existence that is perceived to be as this wonderful thing, instead of living in the moment. We're far more concerned about appearing as though we are in these locations, we live a certain lifestyle, instead of actually just going out and living it.
I mean, also for me, the question, like the point of the deceptive influencer that you're describing, like they're not inauthentic, they're in it for the money. Like they know exactly what they're doing and why. They're highly authentic. They're like, these are my values, here's how I'm gonna go after them. What's inauthentic is all these followers that like admire that, or that like think that that is the key to a good life, like private jets and vacations and all that. The inauthenticity comes in the followers rather than the people putting the content out there. They're just in advertising mode, right? Like they're just like, all right, what's going to make me money? Because if I have a lot of followers or if I'm quote unquote an influencer, then I can get those brand deals, and that's how I'm going to get rich. And I kind of respect the hustle, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I know, but I mean, there is a limit to the. At what point do they even see that it's an empty pursuit?
They're literally there with the fake plane behind them. I think they realize it's an empty pursuit.
I know. I just wonder for those people.
If they're flying in an empty plane.
No,
you're in trouble.
But I do wonder, I think of like the evangelical, like the televangelists and stuff. I think of some of the personalities that I've seen on television. I'm like, people really believe this, and they do. They have thousands, and
they'll enforce it with others as well,
and millions of followers and stuff. But at what point? At what point are they living self-deception as well? Like they've chosen to follow. I'm sure that their background explains the psychology of why they have gone down this path, of becoming deceptive and immoral, or what they don't perceive it as immoral, but it's questionable ethics at best.
Yeah.
I wonder if they ever get to a point where they're like. You can earn all the money in the world, and yet the graveyard is still filled with the richest man and the poorest man.
Well, it's not money only, and so people also enjoy like having power quite a bit.
Okay.
And so you might not even need money. So people love being influential. People love others doing what they tell them to do. It's a drug for some people.
It is, but the realization that regardless even of whatever power you have, you're still going to die. You're still going to die. The idea is you can have all the power in the world. It's like, okay, great. The greatest emperors in the world have come and gone. You're going to die. Memento mori.
What you're referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the prospect of why not make this more meaningful rather than to chase.
Yeah, you've only got so much time on this planet, all of us, regardless of how rich or powerful or we all are. It's so sad to me to see a life dedicated to deceiving others when you've deceived ultimately yourself in thinking that you have power. Because power itself is so deceptive, right? You think you have it.
And it's fickle. I mean,
and it comes and goes. And ironically,
you can be brought down.
This is the beauty of Lao Tzu. That's right. This is the beauty of this guy Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching. If you actually want power, you let go of power. If you cling to power is when you have the least power. When you're swimming against the currents and things, you're powerless. But when you're going with the flow of kind of like nature and it's just, that's why it's so sad to me. To see the dating world that we're in, and we laugh about it, and it's true. But I have
it's
to.
Comedy. It's pure comedy.
God, it is. But there has to be a way out of it. I don't know. I guess I'm an optimist. Maybe I shouldn't be. But there's some definite techniques or wisdoms that are out there. They've got to lead us out of
AI will figure it out. Don't worry.
Enough of us out of this. To me, AI doesn't have that
AI
charisma.
will save us.
AI doesn't have that charisma.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I don't know.
I'm listen.
You don't
You're in
know
love with Copilot.
my
You are-
girlfriend.
Admar, are you actually AI?
As a matter of fact, I am.
Yeah.
I am just a better version of myself. I'm not real. I'm not even here.
A for Admar.
Yes.
We have
I for intelligent.
That's the part where I'm lacking. The A part, I'm okay with that one. The I is very diminutive. It's
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So,
Well, and Elena, I would love. I don't want to miss out on this because I keep telling myself, go there, go there, go there. But I want to hear, and I want our audience to hear all the amazing things you have done. So I don't want to forget asking, but I know that you've worked for the Center for Creative Leadership. You have done, was it a postdoc fellowship in Portugal? And so just some really awesome, incredible things. So I don't want to gloss over those. And just can you tell us a little bit about some of those things you've done? You've worked for CCL in abroad or in
Greensboro, North Carolina.
Okay. And then that postdoc in Portugal.
Portugal.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, that actually brings us back to the beginning of today's conversation because
Okay.
it was like, how did I get into leadership?
Okay.
And so I finished my PhD in deception, nonverbal behavior. And then I see an ad for a postdoctoral fellowship in Lisbon. And it's about like leader emotion, expression, and feedback. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I know much about feedback, but I certainly know a lot about emotion expression. And so I ended up applying for that fellowship. I worked with Dr. Paulo Lopes, who is still living and working in Lisbon. But he had a grant from the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology to look at designing training on how to give positive feedback more effectively. So the idea was like, how do you make it more engaging? How do you infuse it with lots of positive emotion expression? So that was actually my first foray into the world of like leadership, and interpersonal communication, which is kind of like how I see my niche. Like I study interpersonal communication in the context of leadership. So yeah, I ended up working and living in Portugal for a year and a half, 10 years ago at this point. And when I was there, I then saw an ad for the postdoctoral fellowship at the Center for Creative Leadership. They always had a program where they would bring on board, young scientists, because the Center for Creative Leadership was always about like making sure that everything they do is evidence-based, that they're doing their own original research. And I applied for that. They flew me out to have an interview in Greensboro in North Carolina.
Nice.
And so that was my second postdoc in leadership. Both of them were sort of time limited. I couldn't stay there forever. That's how I got into studying leadership. It was during my postdoc times that I did that. And so at the Center for Creative Leadership, we would create like training around emotional intelligence and empathy and things like that. We also did research around the area. We were also looking a lot at physiological indicators of interpersonal processes and like mindfulness. It was also a big topic back then.
That's still with us.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is still with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's needed desperately.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids are suffering it, and a lot of kids are going through it right now. They need techniques to let go, to be able to recenter,
Yeah.
and not be so hard on themselves. Especially girls' depression rates have skyrocketed. Yeah.
Well, it's also associated with like the focus decrements. Like I feel like every second person I talk to these days has some form of ADHD. I call it acquired ADHD, right? Like you're not born with it, but like constantly scrolling and
It's completely evident. I mean, looking at the content that younger and younger children are consuming, it is fascinating to watch the mental flood of information that they're faced with. Because you look at some of the content, it's literally meant to be so fast.
Yeah.
Where
Candy Crush.
you cannot.
Candy Crush.
That's
yeah.
it, and it's
Kids are addicted. Yeah.
continuous. your mind cannot take the time to absorb all the information. So you focus on just a few key things, and before you can perceive them, it already has changed just to keep you occupied. And of course, as they continue to grow, everything else is no longer that interesting. I mean, heck, I'm seeing that, in young kids. I mean, I get to see a young kid go through those stages. It's like, no, we're going to take time. We're going to turn everything off. And you get to put things together in your own imaginary world, which is your own mind, where you get to enjoy things at your own pace.
So you're the most authentic leader there can be because you're a parent. You have to go through it, and you deeply care about your son. So that is.
And talk about deception. Dad, why is this the way it is? That's a wonderful question. Because I said so. Now get dressed. It's cold outside, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
You have to. Why?
Yeah.
I said so. Now it's interesting how that works, isn't it?
Well, we should also mention too, Elena, that you're going to have a book, right? Co-authored, I think.
Oh yeah.
Together
What are you? I hear you're working on a textbook. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I can't wait to purchase it. Actually.
Yes.
Yes, the textbook is called Leadership, a Communication Perspective, and I'm sitting across from my co-author as we speak.
Wow.
It's a significant revision of the previous edition. The 7th edition was released in 2017, 18, something like that.
17, yeah.
A lot has changed since then. It was important for us to update it, also to honor Mike Hackman's legacy, who was one of the original authors. And I actually have a new chapter on there on feedback and leader development, where a lot of this stuff has been.
So exciting.
I want to read that.
Yeah, it's been churning in.
Because I've been
my
reading
mind.
the ones that she's been doing as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's my proofreader.
I'm telling you now, that first chapter. Did you read? You read that as well, right? It's astounding how much. No, I'm not bullshitting. You're taking everything that Dr. Hackman had done, and the way that you've narrated it.
Don't
it's
set
astounding.
expectations
I
too
haven't
high.
read anything
I'm
yet.
biased too. I am biased, but I was just like,
I'm still hustling to finish.
Yeah, we don't read each
I couldn't
other's
put
work
down-
yet. We're all still
I know, okay.
scrambling
I couldn't
to
put
meet
down-
deadlines.
I finished the 30 pages.
I'm not ready for any
And
honest
I'm-
feedback.
No, I'm not. I'm not. Nor am I.
In my 43 years, I've never seen.
I'm still scrambling
chapter
to
like
finish.
this, Dr.
We
Pitt.
have a deadline coming up, and I've got one entire chapter to finish, and then a tiny bit left of another, and I'm just staring at it, going,
You'll do it.
deep breaths.
You'll do it.
Deep breaths.
You'll do it. You'll do it.
I will.
I know.
I will.
You'll do it.
It's just
We don't have kids. You
the
can do
last
it.
chapter
You can
is
do
the
it.
gender and leadership chapter, and in the current climate, I'm just
Speak your
trying
truth.
to figure out how this puzzle piece
honesty.
fits in the puzzle.
But honesty, we just had incredible wisdom today from Elena. Honesty, honesty,
I
honesty.
know.
That's the way to go. Even if it hurts. Honesty.
Honesty. My heart's a flutter.
Well, what do you think? Is that should we maybe conclude this particular
Anything
episode?
else,
I think we've got
Elena,
enough.
to add before we...
Just a little call to action for everyone.
There you
If
go.
you want to challenge yourself this week, just go and ask somebody for their honest opinion about you or anything about you or anything that you do or say or are. I want you to be bold and try it out.
Be bold. That's
Be bold.
fantastic. And also, if you are interested in any consulting or services that Elena offers, her website has a place that you can inquire. And Elena does do consulting and other services, trainings, and she's fantastic. So you can sign up for her newsletter and inquire about any of those services and make contact with her directly.
Yes. You can also just search for The Honest Leader on Google. It'll take you straight to my blog on honest leadership. It's just some bits and pieces I've written over the years. Nothing too intense, but a bit of a fun read. So, Honest Leader.
Yeah, and she does collaborations if you are a researcher at another university looking for somebody to collab with. Yep. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you indeed for your time. This was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Through the maze, join us So grab your headphones tight, let's go for a ride. With every spin and twist, we'll couldn't run and hide. The Prime Directive, where the laughter's alive. Society's reflections, let's help each other thrive. Politics and culture, oh what a blend. Join on the journey and let's set the trend. As we close the chapter, lend us your ear. The Prime Directive's calling, so let's pass that beer. The Prime Directive, where the laughter's alive. Society's reflections, let's help each other thrive. Politics and